Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo!
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm so excited for this next guest. She is super colorful, like her scenery, if you could see it on YouTube, but also her personality is super vibrant. I know you're going to love this episode. She's a fellow registered dietitian like myself. She's a podcast host and author, and an incredible media expert. Like, her content is phenomenal. So if you're not following her already, I'm definitely going to have you do that now. Jaclyn London, welcome to the podcast.
Tony, I'm so happy to see you, a fellow Gemini dietitian, and also what a privilege. It's a very big privilege to be here. So thank you for having me.
I'm so happy. So I already shouted you out for your Instagram. So before we continue, quickly just put your handle out. I feel like people usually do it at the end, but like people should know who you are now. So
I like that. I love that so much. Yes, it's Jaclyn at Jaclyn London RD, and it's Jaclyn London, like the city, RD.
Awesome. All right. So definitely tag you there. Super excited for you to be here. Just a comment to the listeners. My microphone, I don't know what's going on with it, guys. So I apologize. My microphone, my headphones, all the things are not really functioning. So apologize in advance for sound quality. You probably don't even notice. I feel like Jaclyn and I, when we listen back, like, I'm going to notice. But like, Jaclyn's going to sound fabulous.
100%.
I might not sound that great. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully my editing guy can do his magic, but so apologies in advance. Other than that, Jaclyn, I'm so excited to have you here. The first question I always ask my guests is a 3-part question. I would love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
Oh, such a good intro, Tony. Well, okay. All right. Who I am, let me see if I can remember. Who I am, what I do, and why. Love this. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to mute myself because I'm eating my cereal.
Oh my God, please eat your cereal. I mean, safety first.
4:30 in the afternoon, but I am hungry and it's my favorite snack. So we can talk about that after.
Exactly. It's snack time, 100%. So I am a New York City based registered dietitian, author, podcast host, and brand consultant, and also a media consultant. So I have spent quite some time working in multiple areas of nutrition communication. So I started out in clinical. I then worked at a private practice while I was still working in clinical, focusing primarily on sports nutrition and overall weight management, and then transitioned into my role at a national lifestyle magazine. I was nutrition director at Good Housekeeping, and there started a licensing program for food products, for food and beverage products that was separate from the iconic Good Housekeeping seal, but in the kind of wheelhouse of the same program. And then I took a role, I will go in this order. Yes. Then I took a role at WW, formerly Weight Watchers, to be their head of nutrition and wellness, and was there for 2 years. And while at Good Housekeeping, I actually wrote this book, Dressing on the Side and Other Diet Myths Debunked, 11 science-based ways to eat more, stress less, and feel great about your body. I did not anticipate how long that title would be to say, but it is a good title. I'll still stand by that. And honestly, the book is the perfect example of why I do what I do. And it's because it really started from this whole idea of working in private practice and even in clinical settings, and even, in publishing, working for a magazine and working for a large corporation that's publicly traded. Like, I would always encounter the same myths over and over again. And it would come to life for me in the form of really, of what I would assume would be questions. So things like if you were to say, like, what's a good nutrition question? Like, there's a lot of ways we could take that, right? Like, there's a lot of different answers we could give, or a lot of questions that we could be asked. But ultimately, I was finding that people were starting sentences with, I know I should, but, and I would feel like, oh my God, well, like, how weird is it that, first of all, that people have been essentially ever so slightly tricked, like, and I mean that in like the simplest and purest form, like not intentionally, not maliciously tricked, but like the confusion and different sides of different pieces of scientific snippets that would get reported or promoted in the media or like would become big stories or big news items were so often just different sides of the same coin. And yet it was always being repackaged as something new and different when ultimately just some like level setting and clarity needed to be made available to people. The other component of the book that was really important to me and is really speaks to why I do what I do and what I do now is that we really don't talk about nutrition or food and nutrition rather, as happening within the context of our lifestyle rather than something that we have to just completely upend our lives in order to achieve, right? Like, it's like, if you want to be on a keto diet, you can't make the choice to leave your job and move to Rome to become a pasta maker, because how are you going to taste the pasta? You know what I mean? Like, it's these things like we don't want
dream
food
killer.
to
Keto being the dream killer.
Keto's the dream killer. Exactly. It's a science-less dream killer. Although, I mean, arguably less. Well, whatever. I won't even go there. But anyway, the idea of clarifying some of this misinformation that's out there and also being able to do so with the understanding and compassion for people living their lives and wanting to live their lives and also wanting to be able to make healthier choices while they're living their lives and not giving up something entirely only to suffer, giving up things in order to choose something different. That's really what, and I quote you on saying that's really what compromise means. Yeah. And it's really, navigating what compromise means on an individual level means so many different things. So now I work with groups, with individuals, with clients. I work with brands and I work with media to kind of help to reframe some of that confusion and to tell the larger story of what does it actually mean to live healthfully in 2022 and beyond, especially when we've just like been through so much and have had so much to deal with just in the last 2-3 years. So
yeah, definitely.
That's really the purpose.
A question that's like, I don't know if anybody cares but me, but I feel like I've seen you in the media. So where have you been? Because now that I've been following you for a while, but now I'm like, oh my God, I'm pretty sure I saw her on the news preaching a positive message. Have you ever been on like Good Morning America or like stuff like that?
Yes. So God, what an amazing opportunity. So I was on Good Morning America. I was on Today Show.
I know your face. It's so exciting. I like read. It's like, I don't know why it didn't resonate before, but I'm like, I know she looks familiar, but it's not because of Instagram. And it's not because we know I was like this, I've seen her on television. So thank you for everything that you do. Because
my gosh, thank you.
We need it.
We need it. Tony, something I was thinking about today, interestingly, in that vein, is that I was thinking about how we've seen this, and rightly so. Let me just preface anything I'm about to say with saying rightly so. We have seen such a kind of rise in open discussion about seeing a therapist, working with a therapist. And I think there's so many great things and great components to that. But I feel like some of that is missing from our profession. You know what we need to elevate the conversation coming from dietitians about how we approach taking care of ourselves mentally, psychologically, physically. And sometimes we get overlooked in that. It just like really randomly came up today, but it got my wheels turning about what's up with that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, I'm interested to hear, because I know that one thing I wanted to ask you was like some of the less obvious ways to practice self-care. So I'm curious what your answer is to that, because I feel like it ties into what, like, I think people think of taking care of themselves as like, I don't know, bubble baths, right? And I'm sure like what you're talking about from a physical component and a mental health component, like self-care is so much more than that, but it's not as obvious as what people think. Like, what would you say would be those things that people can do?
So the first thing I would say, and I wrote all about this in Dressing on the Side also, but I would, as a little primer for that, I would say the number one thing to having a better kind of self-care practice is to understand your own personal priorities as they relate to your health. So like, how do you want to feel tomorrow? How do you want to feel today? What do you need right now? What do you need that's going to help you feel better a few hours from now, tomorrow? And that can take different forms and it can mean different things on different days, but you can't really set boundaries until you have an understanding of your own priorities, right? So like I hear a lot of this talk about boundary setting and it's huge. It's so important. And I am personally struggling with it all the time. Like it's always a kind of moving part for me. But it's also because my priorities can shift every day. And if I don't remember to take it back to what's the priority, like what do I know I need first? So that's it on a much more macro level of like, what are my personal priorities? And I like just to give a couple of examples in working with clients that comes up in different ways. So like great example being, you know, you want to work out after work, but you find yourself always getting pulled into a last minute meeting. Okay. So how are you going to set up either your day differently, or you're going to set up the plan for the workout differently, or you're going to say, I'm working out no matter what, and I'm going to excuse myself from this meeting and say, I've got to go. I have a hard stop at 6:00. Whatever. There's many different ways that you can personally decide what you feel comfortable with as far as setting that boundary, but the priority for you has to be defined first. So thinking about like, what are some of the things that you know make you feel good? Just baseline, and just kind of writing those down or having some kind of mental list of like what that looks like for you. I mean, for me, it is like, I have often found that having time to like get outdoors every single day, even when it's freezing cold or it's swelteringly hot, it's just like, it always helps me reset no matter what. I mean, and I feel like, you know, there's certainly plenty of research to having like an outdoor break or a nature moment, if as much as we can actually have that in a concrete jungle such as New York. But having those moments can actually be so much more powerful than we think they are. And I think a lot of that got a little bit corrupted by some of that like early 90s, late 80s talk of take a few extra steps, park your car far away from the grocery store. Like some of these really like not sensical, not really real life relatable things that we used to talk about this. Like, yeah, that's a great idea, but not if you want to get your groceries fucking fast. Like then you don't really want to park that far away from the supermarket. You know what I mean? Like there's things like that come up all the time. I'm going to let the dogs just bark that one out because I'm going to keep talking. Anyway, my other thing, exactly. My thing from a nutritional standpoint about what it means to practice self-care is just to take care of basic biology first in any and every situation. So I define that as drink, snack, rest. Are you hydrated? Have you had enough meals and snacks today? Have you eaten the right combination of nutrients to keep you satisfied and not just full at those meals and snacks? And are you doing things that feel restful to you, like getting enough sleep and having enough physical activity, or doing enough things to help you set yourself up to get enough rest tonight?
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it's so funny. I just recorded a TikTok about like the fundamentals that everyone can implement, and everything you just said was in there because it's so true. It's so
true. And it's also so, I also feel like the part of it that can be challenging is that it can seem less sexy than it's a less sexy sounding thing to be like, yeah, you've got to eat consistently. You got to stay hydrated. You got to make sure that you're doing things that feel like they're actually charging you with energy and not draining your energy. Like those are the things that are just truly fundamentals, but they wind up being things that make it confusing to know what's our responsibility and what's not, or like what's in our control and what's not in our control.
I'm interrupting your podcast because I need to talk about poop. So sorry, but as a dietitian, I talk about poop a lot. And if you struggle with gas, bloating, diarrhea, acid reflux, and/or constipation, then you're definitely going to want to listen up. Gut Personal is the first line of personalized gut supplements, allowing you to create a customized protocol to address your symptoms, support your healing, and optimize your gut health. And the best part? Gut Personal was founded by my friend and colleague, registered dietitian Bridget Carroll. She has years of experience healing women's gut symptoms and improving their gut health. Also, bonus about Gut Personal, it's 100% female founded, funded, and staffed. Women empowerment for the win. All of the products are FDA tested and approved. So if you've been experiencing gas, bloating, diarrhea, acid reflux, and/or constipation, or even if you just want to take some preventative supplements to keep your gut strong and healthy, then I highly recommend starting your gut healing journey by taking their quiz at gutpersonal.com. This quiz was created to better understand your gut health symptoms so that you can get emailed product recommendations to support your healing and optimizing your gut health. Click the link in my show notes or go directly to gutpersonal.com to take the quiz, and make sure to use Tips with Tony 10 at checkout to get 10% off your order.
I feel like in a very alternate universe, this dog is practicing her self-care all the time. She barks when she feels like it. She gets walked multiple times a day. She sleeps like she's having the deepest slumber of her life, and she never misses a meal. I feel like I could learn a lot. Like most people could learn a lot from dogs right there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm going to keep that part in. I love that.
I love it.
Amazing. Okay. Well, you started to talk about, I love what you said, which is, it's sad though, that a lot of people would start their sentences with like, I know I should, but, or I shouldn't do this or whatever. So what are some of those like most common myths that you've heard that we can like debunk right now? Like, can we maybe pick like top three? Is that
yeah. Yes. I love that. All right. So a few of them, like the biggest ones that I see, and I see different versions of them coming up on social a lot too. So like the number one, I need a detox, right? Like I know I should like do a detox, or I know I should be drinking more green juice, or I know that I should try this 30-day challenge, right? The idea of doing this really temporary but extremely challenging, damn near Olympic sport that may or may not work for you. Either way, it's not going to be a long-lasting change. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be something that fundamentally shifts your behavior in a way that helps you stick with it for life, which is ultimately your goal, right? Like any kind of weight loss goal ultimately is a weight management goal. Once you get there, you don't want something that's going to be temporary and then make you feel like, oh shit, I just failed and now I've gained back all of the weight that I lost, or whatever else it is.
Before you go on, I need to highlight what you just said, because I don't think people get that. Yeah. Any weight loss goal is also a weight management goal.
100%.
That nobody gets that.
Yes. Nobody gets that. You're so right. Nobody gets that.
I think that they do, but like they don't, you know what I mean? It's like, it's like on it's like the subconscious, like, it's like, oh yeah, duh. But like, no, you don't know. Do you though? Do you get it? Do you get it? That you're not just trying to lose weight your entire life. You know, that if you are trying to lose weight, you're eventually want to also learn how to maintain that. You don't just get there and then you're done. Yeah.
100%. And also it's such a challenge to also make sure that people get that there's nothing good that happens just overnight. There's just nothing. I mean, like, it might feel great. You might feel like you wake up a certain way, but that's only a cosmetic or a natural sort of ebb and flow of life, right? Like good things happen over time, and they happen in a really slow and steady way. And if we're not keeping an eye out for what that progress actually looks like on a very granular, small scale level, then we're not doing ourselves a service. I usually leave it to the client or to the patient or whoever I'm working with to decide if they really want a specific weight loss goal as to be sort of like an end result, but that's really not my focus as the practitioner, right? Like I'm focusing on how you're feeling, what meals you're choosing more often, what types of foods you like to eat, like what your actual preferences are, how you want to feel throughout the day, not just in the morning and not just at night, right? Like how you want to feel more consistently. And it ultimately just comes back to that. Like, how do you want to feel, live, and what do you want to do consistently? Where do you want to spend your time?
Yeah, I love that. All right. So should do a detox. We know we shouldn't do a detox because it's temporary, 100%. It's short term. It's also not necessary as long as your organs are functioning. Really, actually, the act of eating balanced meals and hydrating with water and getting sleep, all the things we talk about it's supporting your liver and your kidney and your lungs and your skin and all the things that are naturally detoxifying us just by having a balanced diet. Like
exactly.
It's doing its job.
Exactly. Like stop telling your liver how to do its job. It works great. It's doing
and
it's
also funny. Sorry, but it's not funny, but it is kind of funny. But it's like it's like it's like this mentality that I need to do a detox. I've been eating like shit. Yeah, you go on and like binge drink on the weekends. And it's like, that's actually damaging your liver. Like that's like actually like not good for you. like not to put fear in people, but like, it's just this crazy thing. It's like you can fear a banana, but yet you binge drink all weekend. I don't get it.
100%. Or you're afraid of a
alcohol is like an actual drug. I love to drink. Trust me. I drink. I probably drink more days than I don't. I have a glass of wine, or we talked about last time on your podcast, like a martini. But like even like, but the act of like binge eating, binge drinking, these things that we're doing in excess, it's coming from this place of I'm not supposed to or I shouldn't. Right. Or somehow this is justified and this isn't. Right. And it's so negative.
It's so negative. And it's just like another way of saying another iteration of saying to ourselves, you're not good enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like another way of continuing to perpetuate that myth because we set this enormously extreme and not meant for human beings standard of like, sipping green juice on a lotus leaf and going on a silent meditation retreat. Like that's like essential. And your liver doesn't need any help doing its job, and neither do your kidneys or your GI tract or your acid-base balance that your kidneys regulate, right? Like we don't need any help doing that. We just need to practice making choices that are more inclusive of food, of real food more often, and more unsweetened bevs, which I know it sounds totally simplified, but like, obviously, I'm preaching to the choir, but like, it sounds totally simple. But I think that's also the really unique difference about our profession is that everything we're talking about is technically like for an outside person, for someone who's not in the profession, it's very simple, but change is what's really fucking hard.
Yeah, no, right? It's so true. It's so true. It's simple, but it's hard to do it sometimes, especially when we're in this world of, do this, try that, do this, do that, right. Okay. What's number 2?
Number 2, I'm going to say, this is a good one. I have no willpower. Oh my God. Doesn't that just like make your skin crawl a little? You heard the W word. Yeah.
So where did that come from? Where would you say?
I think that comes from I think that comes from media of all types everywhere. Number 1, I think depending on how old your parents are, like your parents' generation, it could come from your family of origin or how you grew up, the family system in which you grew up. I think it also just comes from the language that we use to describe the reward. Food as a reward. So like the idea of you need to have a tremendous amount of willpower to achieve a specific goal. And then you're rewarded with food, which you need. Food being different from drugs or being different from basically anything else, with the exception of air and water. You need it in order to live. So like we can't treat it with the same sort of behavioral only model that you would for any type of addiction treatment. We can't treat it like it's just a biochemical thing because we're breathing, thinking humans who are so much more than that. So you can't simply rely on this abstract concept of willpower. There is research on willpower, but it is behavioral science led. It's not really about we're not meant to have willpower around food. If we're feeling like we have to white knuckle it through our day in order to get through it, then that's a sign that we're also either doing something unnecessarily restrictive and we're not feeding ourselves the way that we are meant to be actually nourished. Or it can mean a variety of other things, but those things deserve their own moment to be explored also. That's why I always bring it back to those basics of the drink, snack, rest, because so often in practice, I mean, how often you probably see this also, is that people are simply they're not taking the time to plan out actual meals and snacks, or to stop themselves when they're not feeling extremely starved to actually have a snack. Right. Yep. Because like we're going so long for long periods, or you're fasting, another one of my personal triggers. Right? Like you're like fasting for a prolonged period. So you're not realizing that, of course, you feel totally out of control or like you have no willpower around the Swedish fish because you're operating on empty, right? Like you are running on full blown empty. So yeah, no one should have willpower around food when they're starving, right? Or when they haven't had the right combinations of nutrients that keep them satisfied, when they haven't had the right amount of total calories that they need for the day, when they're actually secretly just thirsty. They haven't had a single drop of water in the last few hours. You know what I mean? Like, so these things add up and they contribute to our own feelings of hunger, satiety, how rested we are and how energized we are and how energized we're feeling on a day-to-day basis. It's also like hanger, like the idea of hanger. If I had to replace willpower with one thing, it would be hanger, because that is real.
Yeah.
And it sneaks up on you, right? Like, so when you find yourself in a bad mood and you're like, wait, why am I all of a sudden in a bad mood? Like perhaps you need a little snack, Sandra. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it could be that. So, but like we forget about these things. And I think that it kind of brings me full circle to what I was saying about within someone's lifestyle versus in opposition to it, because like ultimately within your lifestyle, that changes a lot. And it has changed a lot in the last few years. Like within our lifestyle now is that I can't tell you, I personally needed my own reminder during the beginning of the pandemic to get out of my chair to go get a beverage from the fridge. Because like, that's what there are so many ways that we find ourselves not doing those things that we're not paying attention to. And the second we just kind of start having a little bit more mindfulness around what we actually need to help us get through the day, feel energized, feel well, then the more empowered we are to start taking the steps that we really need. But we can't do any of those on running on empty.
Yeah, I love that. I love this idea that like, how can it be about willpower when food is a basic need?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, no, absolutely. And in the root of it is that your relationship with food needs healing. Like if you're saying things like that, or you're feeling that way, that means that your mindset about food needs to be the thing that we work on, not whether you can get better at having willpower or not.
Right. Yeah. Willpower is not a muscle, right? Like it gets talked about like that within the research, like within the like behavioral science research, but you're like, but that's not the muscle here. The muscle is nourishment. Is having the practice of, regularly and consistently doing things that are designed to nourish you and make you feel more like yourself, which is so often what I find myself saying.
Yeah. And also too, just to add to that, like when you are very clear on what you want and what's important to you, you make decisions and you make choices, and therefore willpower is not a factor in that. But when you're kind of like,
totally.
I'm doing this or I'm doing that, or I don't know what I'm doing, it's really hard to make decisions. So that's really what it is. It's just trouble making the decision-making process. It's not willpower. Exactly. No,
such a good point. It's such a good point. Yeah. 100%.
Amazing. All right. What's number 3?
Oh, number 3. All right. So I could say I'll do it. We can do it like a 3.5. I was gonna go with sugar addiction, but there's this other one. Well, sugar addiction, not a thing. We can just clear that one up.
Yeah, I literally just went on my story. Someone had asked one of my Matt Pfeiffer. He's a relationship coach. He talks about like people who like are in a relationship with narcissists and how to get out of them. Anyways. we were on each other's podcast, and someone had asked a question about sugar addiction and is it real? So he like tagged me. He's like, basically like, I'm not the one to answer that. I'm a psychologist or he's a social worker or a therapist, whatever he is. And he's like, you need to talk to a dietitian or whatever. So I just went on my story and talked about it. So yeah, the short answer is, I'll answer that one for you. Sugar is not addicting. It might release some dopamine in the brain, just when just like drugs do, but also just like really yummy food does. And it might excite you, but it's not as addictive as drugs are. We could just say that.
100%.
So it's the third or the half.
The third one, that would be the half. So the proper third one that I think is important, especially now that we kind of are entering into this new world, or at least were perhaps a few months ago, although I feel like the economy is changing things a little bit. But in hearing more about this, like precision medicine or bioindividuality, which I'm truly here for, right? Like we are trained as practitioners to help individuals and to help people help themselves, essentially. But what I would say more than anything is like a big myth, and it's one that I get into in detail in dressing, is that I can't lose weight or take control of my health because of my genetics, my family circumstances, or I don't have any time. Like the can't being this other kind of iteration of a cognitive distortion that stops us from taking the small amount of control that we can wherever we can. But as it relates to genetics more specifically, I just feel like we're starting to see this, like, especially when 23andMe became like such a big thing. It was like, oh, like, I wonder, what runs in my family and how do I find out more about that? Or what do I need to know about myself? Personal data does not stop you from being able to make real, powerful, lasting changes to your health. But food is not Western medicine. Like when I hear food is medicine, which I feel like I'm hearing more and more lately, like there are certain things that are within your control. There are certain things that you're going to perhaps need some medical assistance with, but food can be a huge part of preventative care. It can be almost all of it for some people, but we are all biologically different. We're made up of different DNA. So we're always going to have our unique blueprint, and no one can really take that from us. So I would encourage anyone who has, like, let's say I just did a post the other day about familial hypercholesterolemia, which is like when you have high cholesterol and it runs in your family, which is like, then you can be walking 10,000 steps times a million. You can be eating all the vegetables in the world and having all the seafood instead of steak. But ultimately, your LDL is not going to come down. And that's an important, and we need to normalize the idea that taking medications when you need it is absolutely okay. And it saves lives, right? Statins save lives. But at the end of the day, what can you do versus what are you sort of hiding from? Because I wouldn't want people to think that they're the way that they grew up or the family that they grew up in automatically prohibits them from taking personal control of however they want to live, feel, and be, right? I feel ultimately that information should be used as power and not as a source of power rather than a source of disempowerment.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I think that's such a valid point in that, not to dismiss that it will be harder, right? Yeah. So if you genetically are predisposed to obesity or diabetes or high cholesterol, whatever it is, you are going to probably have to work harder than somebody else who isn't. But that does not mean you cannot change your genetic code, because you actually can. You actually can be someone who is more prone to obesity, and then through lifestyle factors and habits and dietary changes, you can actually shift that. Now, do you have to? Do you need to? No, only if you want to.
Yes.
Basically, we're just letting you understand that you have a choice, and you don't have to have this as a reason why you can't do that. It's just, if anything, more of a reason of understanding of why it's going to be a little bit challenging, but you can still do it.
100%. I love that you use the C word, the choice word.
Yeah.
No, because it's true. Because it's the only way that information is powerful to us, right? Is how we choose to use it. We can choose to not use it at all. But the more we know, we at least have in our kind of back pocket so that we can pull it, or maybe we're not using it at this moment in time, but we're going to use it in the future. Those are all things that help us have a better understanding of who we are and what we need, and therefore how we want to choose to make another choice tomorrow, right? Like, how do we want to live tomorrow?
I love it. Amazing. Okay. Well, we talked about your book a little bit, but I would love to just where I can't believe the time is like flying by. I want you to share maybe, like, I know it's so hard because I know I wrote a book too, and it's like to say like your favorite chapter or your favorite part, or like why people need to buy it or whatever it is. It could be a hard question, but what is one thing in that book that, like, you can give us another little bit of a sneak peek, but if people want to learn more, they should go and get the book?
Yes. So I have a whole chapter that is, I want to say chapter 6. It is chapter 6. I like hear those words coming out of my mouth and I'm like, oh, I really have the PTSD from doing this so much. So I wrote this book. It came out in January of 2019. So I was working with, that I was really, really something I was really tied to doing, because I just hadn't seen this show up in like a relatable, like, this is how it applies to your life kind of way, which is the dietary guidelines. So these are now out there. They're dietary guidelines from 2015 to 2020. But what I tried to show both in that chapter and then throughout the book is how it's showing up for you without you necessarily knowing that this is showing up for you in literally every place that touches food. So dietary guidelines are just guidelines. They are to some extent, they are to some extent a major marketing question mark, right? Because they're not designed to be marketing, but they also are designed to be marketing. When they talk about what you should eat more of, they tell you specifically what foods. They name them by name: vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, right? But when it comes to what to limit, what to cut back on, they name nutrients, which is very much intentional. Sugar, cut back on added sugars, sodium, saturated fat. Well, there are industries that would be affected by these guidelines. There's so much lobbying that goes into this, and there's so many interesting components of the politics of food that factor into what we even get to see on supermarket shelves, or who's invested in what and what industry is affected by what, what political issue or what topic is being addressed in Washington, right? Like what is Congress voting on, right? Like, what do we even want to know about? And I feel like that chapter for me was eye-opening to research and then to write, because as someone who is a nutrition communicator, a nutrition content creator, right? Like, I have been doing this work of trying to make these topics more relatable and accessible to everyone so that you can actually use it and apply it in a very real way. Digging deep into some of this really kind of brings to life why understanding anything, even just those basics about food and personal health and personal priorities, ultimately becomes the most important thing. Because the more informed you are, the better off you are in literally every situation, including when you go to the supermarket. And the goal is not to make you feel bogged down by information. The goal is to make you feel totally free so you can go in and do exactly what you need to do and get out of there. And in this book and beyond, and in my content platforms now, my new goal is to also try and make it relatable from the standpoint of what's actually affordable, because there's so many things that, like, we know grocery prices are rising now, but it's not just about groceries. The book itself has an entire other chapter that's just dedicated to takeout, and a whole other chapter that's just dedicated to restaurants. So there's something for everyone, but I love that, like, the second half of the book is really dedicated to these, like, situational moments and where some of our confusion or mixed messaging comes from on those topics.
I love that so much. Like, practical application versus, like, also, like, getting behind of, like, why this is recommended and this isn't. I think that's awesome. Oh my God. Okay. So where do people find the book?
You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Audible. You can get it at your local bookstore, your local independent bookstore, if you will.
Amazing.
I love to say that because I am a huge fan of bookstores, although I'm trying to think of some great ones near us. I can't, but that's okay because hopefully you are all listening to this somewhere that is not the middle of New York. But yeah, or wherever books are sold. So Barnes & Noble,
Yay!
Amazon,
okay,
anywhere.
Amazing. That's great. Well, Jaclyn, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. One more time, where can people find you on social?
Yes. Find me on Instagram at Jaclyn London RD, and on TikTok, it's just Jaclyn London without the RD. And you can check out the website, jaclynlondonrd.com, which I would love because you can also purchase the book through the website. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you for having me. This was such a delight and such an absolute treat to see you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And it was such a pleasure seeing you. Thank you so much for being here. Guys, make sure you give Jaclyn a follow. Also, if you're not subscribed to the Tips with Tony podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. A new episode comes out every Tuesday and Thursday. And when you're subscribed, you don't miss a beat. All right, that's it from us today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.